Happy Friday, and welcome to the Strat AI and UX Lunch and Learn. My name is Paul Bryan. I produce the Strat Product Design Conference. It's been held in US, Europe, and Asia, as well as the AI Product Design Bootcamp that's coming up May 13th to 15th. It's going to be online this year. My expert guest today is Kay Hofmeester, a visionary leader at the forefront of AI and wearable technology. Kay was manager for AI and wearables at Meta and shaped the flagship AI experiences for cutting-edge products, including the Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses and the groundbreaking Orion AR glasses, collaborating with Meta's leadership on those products. And today I'd like to welcome Kay to the Stratosphere. Hi, Kay, welcome.
Hi, nice to be here, Paul. Thanks for inviting me. Very
Sure.
good
Well,
pronunciation of my name. Impressive.
Hofmeister, is that the guy at the train station that made sure everything ran properly, or?
No, I'm not it means court master. I'm not entirely sure what that means.
Well, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it, taking time out of your busy schedule. I want to talk with you about the paradigm shift for user experience professionals that's happening with AI. Before we do that, though, I mean, you've had a pretty amazing career so far. Can you walk us through what some of the steps have been as you've gotten to this place?
Yeah, happy to. Um, yeah, I started my career in Holland, originally working for Philips Electronics. I did a number of jobs. I worked at a startup in New York. I worked at at a small design institute in Holland on like large European projects. They were like design research projects, which was really fun to work on, with a bunch of companies and universities. And then for a while, I was a creative director for agency.com. Then I became interested in moving to the United States. So I moved to Seattle to work for Microsoft. I worked on Windows Phone. And then one of my favorite jobs was working on Microsoft Surface, which was the big uh, touch table, like coffee table size, multi-user touch device, which was very early when touch devices were just becoming popular. So we were defining like what that would mean, especially for multiple people. I worked for Xbox a little bit. Then I went to Amazon and I worked on the first version of Alexa. So when I got hired on a secret project, which I didn't know what it was. And I found out it was a Pringles can that you could talk to. Um, and so we kind of defined that product, and launched it. Then I went to back to Microsoft to work on Microsoft Band, which was a fitness device, but also on health, which was really interesting to work on all kinds of machine learning applications for health. Um, and after that, I went to Meta, where I spent my kind of past years, first working in research, working on input methods for AR glasses, because it's not really clear how, or at least at that point, it wasn't really clear how to interact with glasses, because they don't have a keyboard or a mouse or something like that. But then when the glasses moved to product, I went with them to product. I was the first designer on Orion. And I created an experience team because I was really interested in figuring out what are the experiences that people will do on the glasses initially, because that was not entirely clear. It's a really cool product, very interesting, great technology, but it wasn't really clear what people would do with that initially. And as you said, in the meantime, we also started working on the displayless glasses, so the Ray-Ban stories first and then Ray-Ban Meta glasses. I didn't work on those for the whole time because I was working on these two products at the same time. And in the last 3 years or so, I worked almost exclusively on AI, for AR glasses, but also kind of in general. So yeah, that's a very quick history.
That's some very cool stuff. I'm going to ask you a little bit about that. But when a Dutchie says Holland, I know they've been in the U.S. for a long time. That's
Yeah.
really unusual. So,
I say Europe also, like as if it's like one country or something.
yeah, exactly. That was a pretty big leap to that Surface thing. I mean, how did you make the leap and get accepted? Because I remember that product; it was really revolutionary. What was it about your background that they said, this guy can probably handle this?
Oh, I went to the team, and initially I started working there, and they needed a screensaver. Um, and I was asked to help with the screensaver. And it was a top-down fish pond. So I had to design, I had to figure out, what is a fish pond? What makes a fish pond? And especially, what makes water water? Because it's really strange. Water doesn't look like anything. So I had to do research and figure out, how do you make water look like water? And I was just working on that kind of relatively small project, but I had all kinds of ideas about how kind of input methods should develop and evolve, and different ways of how we could learn new input methods. Things like what we call self-revealing gestures, which is you can teach people new interactions by just letting them play around with the system, and the interactions will reveal themselves by little peaks or little animations or things. And that will entice people to try it out as long as it's safe. And then they can learn new interactions really quickly. So that was one thing that we kind of developed, which we called self-revealing gestures. And another one was we used kind of like game theory. Game theory means lots of things, but mostly that we had periods where people would be learning a lot. So they would be ramping up, and then they would plateau, and then they would learn a lot and plateau. And we would build in those phases of when they would be learning things, but we wouldn't try them to teach them things all the time. So we built a system where you could learn a whole new input method, which was touch, which at that moment people didn't know how to use it. Um, in a really easy way without having tutorials or having to go through a whole Ubi process or something like that. So kind of ideas that I had about that, the leadership found really interesting. And then they asked me to drive building the new operating system for Surface, which I did, which was a really fun process. Oh, and the other thing we did there was we worked with metaphors. So as a way of teaching people how a system works, you can use a metaphor, which can just be an idea about something. We had metaphors like around the campfire, or the UI is a series of planets and there's rocket ships between them or something. And we wouldn't use those metaphors literally. We would abstract them, but they become like some kind of a system that people can understand to kind of learn a new system. So we built prototypes, and we did a lot of research around that. So it was all kind of ways of teaching people new interaction methods.
Design is a broad topic. So when you went into that aspect of it, like when you got promoted from screensaver to brand new device that never existed before, um, were you more focused on visual design, industrial design? Were you like the Eames brothers, or were you a illustrator? What was your passion at that time that before you got into that? Because what is water? That's a pretty big question for a screensaver.
Yeah, so yeah, yeah, it's a really interesting question, by the way. My background is interaction designer. So I was trained as an industrial designer, but I've always been an interaction designer. So I'm mostly interested in the interactions and the way that people relate to a device. Um, I was also part of the HCI, the Human Computer Interface community, and presented there, etc. So that was my kind of take on how to deal with the system, how to deal with the interactions. And then I would work really closely with strong visual designers, and we also had industrial designers that we would work with.
Okay. Well, being severely ADD, it seems to me that finally we're getting to the place where cognitive styles might have different interaction styles. Like I was
Hmm.
talking to these guys from IO the other day, they made a auditory AI experience that's completely spoken and goes across lots of devices and apps and stuff. And that's the app for me. It just goes to like what I'm listening to, what I'm hearing, what I'm talking about. It was perfect. So do you have a favorite interaction style that has influenced any of these products that you worked on?
Oh yeah, I'm more of a visual person than an auditory person. So that works for me. Um, but I wouldn't say that has influenced me, because I don't feel like I'm designing for myself. but I'm trying to design for whoever the users might be. Um, and I think the combination is, or kind of multimodal design is really interesting. So when I worked at research at Meta initially, we did a lot of haptic work, both like feeling things on your body, mostly on your wrists and on your hands, but also the other way around, making gloves that can kind of sense things, like so it went both ways. Um, so I did a bunch of work there. And then I did a bunch of auditory work for the Meta, the displayless glasses, and of course for Alexa. And further, a lot of it is kind of visual. But what I really like is finding the right modality for the right use case. Whereas, for instance, if you have display glasses, sometimes you don't want to turn the displays on because they will be distracting for people, right? Because they're doing something else. So you only want to use auditory. It's a very simple example. Same thing. I was talking with somebody about like 10-foot interfaces where you're like have TV interfaces and you might want to have an assistant that's only an auditory assistant, but doesn't kind of show up on your TV screen, or sometimes it might show up on your TV screen. So I think those, the ways of when you kind of hand off from one modality to another are really interesting points.
Well, that sets me up for my next question, because your deck that you shared at the Strat conference last year in Amsterdam was around the paradigm shift that's happening in the user experience design field. And that's what I would like to chat with you about today. But as you started working in these different products, there must have been some steep learning curves. Was there a moment where you felt intimidated by data scientists, or was it always kind of a happy collaboration?
I think, yeah, there were definitely those moments. Um, I think first for me, let me see. I guess it started when I was working on Alexa, um, and I had to learn how speech recognition works. Um, and I guess the main concept that I had to wrap my head around was that of uh, kind of if things are become non-deterministic, probabilistic. So you don't know for sure what's going to come out of something. And basically you get a curve, like a bell curve, and you're most of the time you're going to get an answer that's kind of in the middle, but sometimes it's going to be on the outsides and you never really know what's going to happen. So in your designs, you have to take that into account. You have to take into account all the different ways that the system could react, and then how would that surface to the user. So I learned that from the voice designers who were, or some of them who were much more used to that and who could kind of like really taught me the intricacies of how that works. It's a very different way than what we normally have for screen design, where you click a button and you know exactly what's going to happen. Um, and then when I went to research, that became even kind of stronger, because that was really, they had piles of health data, um, and they would kind of run it through their systems and then data would come out, but we didn't even know how that data was generated. Like you had no idea what would come out. There is this comic of somebody showing how it works, and he has like a big pile of shit and he's like stirring the pile, and you put something in on one side and something comes out on the other side, and the guy asks, how does this work? And he says, I don't know, it just stir and something comes out. And so we had to kind of learn how to work with that, and initially I didn't really understand it. I can't say I completely understand like technically how it works right now, but I know how it behaves, right, like as a black box on the outside. So now I feel much more comfortable with kind of designing for that, and creating different yeah, I guess outcomes like designs for it.
It seems like, I don't know, dichotomous is the right word, but designers have typically created objet d'art, objects like from the Bauhaus that are beautiful, they're functional. I made it. I'm a designer. I did that Aeron chair. I did that Porsche, or whatever it's going to be. And now suddenly you're telling me that when people experience what you've designed, it may be something like what you had imagined. It could be a little different from that. That seems a little disconcerting.
Yeah, I love it. It's really interesting because if you know exactly what's going to happen, it's like, okay, like I designed this, I click this button, this happens. Now I know, now I'm kind of done, right? There's nothing to do anymore. Whereas if you design something that is more organic or flexible, like every time you use it, you don't know exactly what's going to come out, and the system will surprise you in delightful ways and sometimes not so delightful ways. And then you're like, okay, I need to tune this a little bit. I need to turn these knobs. I need to deal with this. Oh, I forgot about that kind of case that could happen. Or sometimes it's like, oh, I told the system to do this and this, and it actually did it, but that's not what I meant. So I instructed it in the wrong way. So it becomes this really interesting problem that is kind of never ending. You're just fine tuning it more and more, and it gets better and better.
So you're shaping kind of a living thing that's got a mind of its own in some sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, and at what point in that wonderful career path that you told us about, what point did that happen where you recognized that deterministic, probabilistic shift?
Oh, that was in the beginning when we were working on Alexa. Um, we had a specific moment where so if you ask a question, right, like you say, I want to play Alt J, I want to play a song, um, and the system can recognize it or not recognize it, but it recognizes it with a certain confidence, which we don't know. You don't see that on the outside, but that's how the system works. Um, and the engineers were proposing that if it was below a certain level of confidence, it would just make a sound, would go or something like that. And then you would have to kind of say it again. And if it recognizes it, would play the song. And we didn't agree with that because that's not how humans interact with each other. And it's not like what meets your expectations. So we wanted a system where, based on that confidence, it would have different answers. So for instance, if it would kind of recognize it, but it wouldn't be completely sure, it would say, you want to play all J, right? And all you have to say is yes. Or if it was like pretty much not sure, it would say like, sorry, can you repeat that again? Or I think it's all J, but I'm not sure. Like it had different phrases that it would say. Um, and some people might think like, oh, that's very cumbersome and complicated, and people have to like now have this whole conversation. But we tested it. One thing, it's Amazon, and at Amazon, things get tested pretty thoroughly. That's part of their company culture. So we tested it with a large group of people, and they preferred the version where it would kind of confirm your request, right? Where it would say like, you want to play all J, right? And then you say yes, because that interaction goes so quickly that you barely notice it. But by the time it's done, you forget that it actually happened. It's just a second and it's over. Whereas if you ask for something and it plays the wrong song, it's extremely irritating because you have no idea what that song is. And I've had it happen where it starts playing really loud songs and I'm with people or something and I don't want that. So it was much better to have the kind of the nuanced view that's maybe a little bit less, seems a little bit less work for the user than to just have this kind of black and white, like I know or I don't know view. So we were kind of advocating for that kind of more human approach. So that's where I kind of learned how you can tune it, because that's a lot of work to tune that system, figure out like the confidences, how they work, because the confidences are not entirely, it's not as clear cooked as you think it is. But I think it's worth it to kind of think that way.
Well, these companies that you mentioned, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, they can afford to hire some great scientists. Were you a little intimidated at first to have to kind of engage with them at that level, or was it just seem natural?
I love it. I especially love working with research scientists. They're so different from designers, right? Because designers just love to make up stuff. So I just walk around like spouting ideas and kind of being like, oh, this would be cool. Oh, I think this. And the research scientists, especially, they're very thorough. Like when they speak, what they say is very well thought out and it's the truth and they know it from their sources, etc. So they're very different kinds of people, and it's really interesting to interact with them and to kind of learn from that there's a completely different worldview than the one that we have. And sometimes it's intimidating because I would like say like random stuff and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, is that really true?" And I'm like, no, I just thought about it. I'm not so sure.
But
um, so,
that seems like a big added value because it seems like if everything is optimized and accurate, I think you used the word earlier on in our conversation, the human lens could be missing.
yeah, it's true. But I think both views are really useful because I have a lot of respect for the thoroughness of scientists. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as people are getting into this paradigm shift, what kind of advice would you give to them as they're maybe it's a little daunting because the first AI meeting I went to in San Francisco, I didn't understand more than 10% of the words the person at the front of the room said. I just didn't get it. And so I think what I did after that was just start asking AI about itself and about how do I work with data scientists and just start having conversations about that. But what would you suggest that people do to start getting prepared for that kind of interaction?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are doing it already right now, but I don't think you need to know all the intricacies of AI or of how like a neural network works or things like that, because I think that's gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. It's fun if you want to learn like what a transformer is, etc. Um, but what I do think is very useful to know is what's available, right? Like what are the models that are available? How do they behave? What can you do with them? What are their capabilities, etc. So just kind of being aware and learning about the different things that are available, and maybe a little bit about how it works, but just kind of at a high level. Um, and then I think what's most important is to play around with it. So to start doing yourself. So a lot of people are vibe coding now. So I would say go do some vibe coding um, or there's different ways. Like I'm teaching a course here at the University of Washington, and I'm teaching the students Protopie, which is a pretty simple way of prototyping that's not hard to learn, and you can connect it to API, so you can actually build AI applications as well with that. So I would say like, yeah, go play around and start learning yourself, like what it actually means to build a design with AI, like those experiences that we just talked about, where you build something and it does something different than you expected it to do, or sometimes it does it and sometimes it doesn't. Like, well, why is that? How does that work? How did I instruct it wrong, or is that just how it works? Or should I pick a different model maybe? Or there's a lot of things, a lot of levers that you can pull that you can play with.
Well, there's a lot of news that seems to be, I guess I would say, fear mongering. And so when you use the word paradigm shift, the first thing that occurs to me is career insecurity. And so I'm wondering, how you see that paradigm shift unfolding. Are we talking about, and you do live on the west coast of the US, which is probably the most advanced in some ways, at least from a business innovation perspective. Um, how does that unfold in your point of view to where, like, when are people affected by this more and more versus, oh, it's still a ways off?
Yeah, I think our job as designers will become more interesting and still relevant. Because currently we create these deterministic designs, right? Where we work in a tool like Figma. Um, we move pixels around. We create one design, and that single design is now served in the case of like large companies to millions, or in the case of Meta, like billions of users, right? So if you think about that, there's like one design, one thing that was made, and it's served to millions or hundreds of millions of users, the same thing. Um, that doesn't make any sense. That can't be right? That all those people actually should have the same design. They should probably have individual designs, or at least like there should be certain groups that have different designs or something. And we can't do that right now. So if you start creating designs with AI, you can actually do that, right? You can personalize your designs to specific people, or you can contextualize them to specific circumstances. Now, that way of designing, I think, is much more interesting than creating the one lowest common denominator design that works for everybody. It's much more interesting to design a system that can be tailored to the needs of each individual person. It's a great challenge, and it's definitely not easier than creating that single lowest common denominator design.
Well, my big concern is for the UX community. I've been in this field since it started back in the 90s. I designed a user interface for a pharmaceutical information system, which was an unfortunate acronym at the time, but that was 1990. And yet I'm concerned, that this shift that you're talking about is going to kind of shock people. Do you see it coming as a shock, like very soon, or do you see this just sort of, AI's taken off? There's some people working with it. .com websites are going to be around for a long time. Take your time, get to know things, or is it like this weekend, go find something and go start working with it?
Yeah, so I mean, I can't tell what's going to happen with jobs in general, right? Because the AI tools are making everything more efficient. So does that mean that there's less people needed in general, not specifically for design or not? I'm not sure how that's going to work out. But I think for designers, you can have two approaches. But you can keep doing what you're doing and then wait and see the changes that are going to be applied to you. So one day your manager or somebody's going to come to you and say, now you're going to do this, or we have no place for you anymore, or whatever it is that they're going to say, right?
That's a big
Or,
difference.
yeah, or you can say, oh, I'm really interested in this change, and it sounds very cool and challenging, and I'm going to learn about it. And then you can, if you take that even further, first of all, you can learn, you can prototype so that you kind of know what a designer can do in this new world. But then in whatever organization you work in, you can also start driving change, right? You can spearhead change. You can say like, hey guys, I was thinking of this and this way of doing things, which would be, I don't know, more efficient or more personalized or better for our customers. And then what you can do is you can make design a leading team in your organization, because you are coming up with the new ideas that people will be interested in, and that for sure gives design a seat at the table to be part of the discussion of where the company should go. So I think it's a very interesting challenge for designers to at least help lead their organization in I don't know, new directions.
Well, have you ever had a data scientist or a machine learning engineer kind of say, this is not your area, or were the companies you worked for were pretty savvy? So I imagine that maybe that didn't happen, but I'm thinking that other people listening to us, that maybe that's happening in their organization where they're not really welcome to be joining in those aspects. Is there something that I could do as a designer to make them like me more and let me play?
My experience is that the data scientists are always very excited, or the ones I worked with were always very excited to work with designers. And part of that is because what they do is numbers stuff, and it doesn't really look like anything, or when you see it, it doesn't look very good. Um, and they can use designers for building the interface to people, to humans, of their work, and they're really interested in that. So that's one thing. The other one is about like what to do, because they can do so much stuff with the data that they have, but sometimes they don't know exactly what to do or what the best direction is. And you can say like, hey, our users really need this, or they would really like to know this, or they would really, this and this would really help them. So I've always seen that in working with data scientists that they're really interested and kind of hungry for working with designers. You do have to um, understand their tools. And that is kind of daunting in the beginning. So every time when I started working with them, they're like, oh yeah, I'm doing this, whatever, in Python, and here are my tools. And I look at them and I have no idea what's happening or what it is, or I don't even know where to begin. Um, so there's often like a steep learning curve to figure out like how the tools work and what to do. I don't think you have to learn Python necessarily, um, but you definitely have to kind of learn their tools or learn some of the tools, not all the tools, some of the tools that they use so that you're better able to communicate with them. Like often they'll have like some kind of a playground or something where that is connected to their data systems where you can play around with prompts, for instance, or something. Yeah.
Well, a couple of words that you've said have stuck out to me. One was when you changed from the screensaver to the surface, you used the word help. And so I think one thing perhaps people can do is look around for somebody doing this kind of work in their company or their agency and say, can I help with some aspect of this? And then as a helper, then sure, come along and help out with that, and then learn over time what those tools are, as you said. And then the other word is this almost like from Zen, beginner's mind. If you're anxious about wading into dark waters, then it's going to be a problem. That if you're not ready to be, hey, teach me, then you might have some issues.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell people, guys, we're going to look at chat. And so if you have a question that you'd like to ask Kai, please put it in the Zoom chat. And if you put it on LinkedIn, then Valeriu, who's on the Strat team, will send it into the chat on Zoom. So we're talking about the paradigm shift that's happening with design. As you look forward, you've worked on some very interesting stuff. What are you excited about that's in your future? What would you like to experiment with, or what kind of situations would you like to find yourself in as a designer?
Well, yeah. So I made a short post on LinkedIn of that presentation that I gave at Strat last summer, um, and that's the thing that I am most excited about. And I'm sure it's going to happen or actually happening because the more and more I talk to people who have the same ideas. Like a few years ago, it was still kind of pretty far out there, and now it's like more and more people are like either tell me their ideas, which are the same, or are like, yes, exactly, that's what's happening. So, and that is that instead of AIs right now just kind of creating text, even kind of nicely formatted text, or they can also create UIs, but they do it kind of offline, right? Not real time. You can do it like in, I don't know, Photoshop or something. That AIs will start communicating with you, interfacing with you in UIs. So visual UIs that are kind of laid out with images and buttons and all the UI controls that we're used to, and give you information in that way. And then you can either still talk to it if you want to, or you can interact with the user interface, or both at the same time, so that your applications are becoming kind of real-time created for you. That's, to me, it's super exciting.
Yeah, so Valerio, please make a note to post that presentation and get that from Kai to put in when we post this video in the AI and UX LinkedIn group. Let's include that presentation there so people can understand more about it. But as you were speaking just now, Kai, it struck me, I was a photographer a long time ago and used film. And I had a Hasselblad camera, and I loved the grain. I could taste the light. I could, feel it. And then with digital, I didn't have to wait like a really long time to see what the impact of that change was, whether it was perspective or whether it was, the balance, composition. I don't have to wait. It's just right there. I lost something from using the manual tools because I really do love the grain. I like those little notches on the Hasselblad when you make the photo. It's like, boom. there it is. But now I can have so much more control over expressing my vision. And is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, if you compare it in that way, then because I used to do photography myself also, and developing your own film, etc., is what you're talking about, I think. And it was such a slow process, right? Like you only have a few pictures. I had a Rolodex, which was equally fun. A Rolodex, that's not what it's called. What is it called? A
Oh,
Rolodex. Yeah. Um, and but you had like, I forget what it was, like 12 pictures or something in a roll of film, like almost nothing. And then you have to go back to the dark room and develop it. And maybe you got the right picture, maybe not. And now you just kind of run out and you have as many pictures as you want, and you can see them immediately. You can check immediately. And maybe it's a little bit similar to that, right? Like our design process right now is kind of slow, right? We go through many rounds of reviews and user testing, etc. And then we have this one kind of fixed thing that will stay the same for a long period of time because it's hard to change it. So it's also this kind of slow process. Whereas if we use this new AI-driven process, it will be kind of organic and fluid all the time, right? It can change all the time. And some people are worried about that, but and it's much easier to change it as well because you make a change in the prompt, and will kind of change its behavior. Um, so I think there's definitely similarities between the two, and pros and cons, of course, right? Because you have less control um, now over a new system like that, and some people are worried about consistency. If it's like the same results all the time, I think you can design for that. But so yeah,
I
there's
guess the
lots of
impression I got was vibe designing, that you're kind of describing and it's changing, and you're describing and it's changing. So instead of Michelangelo, like I remove everything that is not David, you're saying kind of the opposite. Like, where are we going with this? What's going to happen? What's
yeah,
going to be next? Sounds like an adventure.
yeah.
Very
And
cool.
it becomes like with the photography, the problem becomes that there's too much, right? Like you have too many pictures, and now you have to like go through all those pictures and figure it out. Whereas it used to be you had only a few and you had to pick the right one. And I think in this kind of designing, it's kind of the same, right? There's like this overflow of information of like different types of user interfaces that kind of come out of this system that you kind of have to look at. Yeah.
Well, getting back to cognitive diversity, it seems like your words are going to be pretty important in that process, like the way that you express yourself, the way that you express your vision. You kind of have to have a clear concept even to begin, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think design system is really important. So that is still kind of the visuals and your controls and things like that. But then prompting, obviously, the words are really important. And sometimes it's yeah, sometimes if you make a mistake of like one character or something, it starts behaving differently. So you have to be very careful with what you say and how you say it. And sometimes I can't figure out like how to convince it to do something. So yeah, that's interesting.
And it sounds like those are words that are going in there, but as multimodal AI gets traction, then it sounds like you could be feeding different things. And some people are concerned that you're feeding their work or their voice or other things into your creativity. But on the other hand, it feels like a much more natural process to be working with different kinds of media as you're shaping that design.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Because right now so I have a prototype running because I'm playing around with it like regularly. And in that prototype, I give it examples, but the examples are in code, right? So but it would actually be interesting to feed it literal visual examples saying like, hey, these are good designs, make them like this. Um, that would be nice to try.
Well, the past few years with Figma and UX going through the various changes it's gone through, people have been concerned and have been asking over and over again, designers need to code. It sounds like if you're afraid of code, you might have an issue with the probabilistic world that you're moving towards.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if you like the a lot of people who are vibe coding, they don't know how to code, right? And they don't really understand the code. They just talk to the AI and things happen. Um, I think for me, if you want to do something a little bit more complicated, then you do have to understand code. I wouldn't say that I'm not a prototyper or a coder, but I kind of know enough to do with a prototype what I want to do, and I kind of learn on the way. So I just think it's fun, and maybe some people don't think it's fun. I'm not really sure, but if
I
you
mean,
understand them,
if you're averse to it, there could be a problem.
yeah.
Like you don't want to see it, you don't want to touch it. It's like some people with numbers are just I forget what it's called, but it's like dyslexia with numbers. I just
Yeah,
don't.
then you have to you just then you would have to find somebody to work with, right? Because then you would stay more on the design system and prompting side and let somebody else deal with the code. That should be fine.
Okay, well, let me take a look in chat. And so uh, JP asks, what kind of tools should the UX designer learn about to be able to start wading into this probabilistic design? What's first on your list as far as, hey, start playing around with X tool?
I would because I assume all the designers they already know their design tools because that's what you have to know to be able to make a good design system or something. You need to be able to write a little bit. So I would make sure to learn a prototyping tool so that you can build things yourself. Because otherwise you're only thinking about it or doing it like statically on paper. And it's very hard to imagine like what it's really like if you have a probabilistic system that comes up with different kind of results every time. And I mentioned some already, right? So like if you don't want to get too deep into it, you can learn Protopy, which is a very friendly, like designer friendly system. Um, what I'm doing is I'm doing it in JavaScript, which is also actually not that. It can get really complicated depending on how far you go, but it doesn't have to be. It can kind of stay pretty simple. So those are kind of two tools for prototyping that I know. I know my colleagues were, because I was at Meta and we were doing headset, were prototyping in Unity. Um, I found that much hard, having much steeper learning curve. Um, it would be cool if you can do it, but it was harder for me to learn, so I didn't really get very far into that. So I think those two would be kind of the main I would recommend.
And when you say prototyping, would that include things like Lovable?
Uh, I'm not familiar with that. Maybe.
Okay. Just, all right. Let me go to the next question. Sogra, my experience has been the same. Data scientists are very excited to understand the why because they're not fully aware of the deeper insights that result in the data that they are seeing. So that's a comment rather than a question.
Yeah, agree.
And from Adam, hello, great discussion. A few questions. Personalization with AI feels more within reach for designers now. Any tips on how to start exploring personalization, especially for things like e-commerce, marketing sites, or healthcare?
Yeah, you can, or kind of what I'm exploring with in prototypes is different kinds of personalization. So you can keep track of context, so that the system understands what you've been talking about, what you like, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and then to keep that into account. Um, you can start keeping a list of preferences for the user, and the user could maybe actually directly set them, or they can be learned by the system. And those can be things like, I like my buttons to be really big so I can read the text really clearly, or I like the color blue or something like that. But it can also be other things like I would like more text so that I like more detail rather than less detail, or just give me very short answers or not too many options, or so there's a lot of things that you could do there. So yeah, either do it through context, do it through user preferences, do it through learning from the user, and then there might be other ways for personalization that you could think of yourself.
Um, I was reading some stuff about personalization yesterday, and what it really struck me was personalization means not personal. It means like we're gonna act like it's personal, but really it's not. But what you're saying is there are preferences that should be able to be communicated that then the system responds to.
Yeah, this should be one-to-one personal. Yeah, I think in traditional UI, personalization is not really personal because nothing is really personal. It's all deterministic. But in this case, I think it can be really personal, like really just made for you in the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Part two, was the timing of Alexa's responses something you had to put a lot of thought into? Siri sometimes pauses awkwardly, so I'm curious if that was a challenge.
Yeah. Alexa now has the Alexa Plus system, which is going to be released very soon, I hope, which is an LLM-based system. The system that I worked on was based on business logic. So it has um, speech recognition and natural language understanding, and then it has text to speech. But between those things, there's no kind of AI smartness. It was all business logic. So something comes in, it gets recognized, and then we're like, oh, this is a music request. Let's go to the music app. And then the music app handles it and comes back with something. So it was not as smart as you would think it is. So we couldn't really do things with understanding like the types of requests and figuring out like timing or pauses or something because it was not smart enough for that. We were just trying to be as fast as possible, have as low latency as possible, and have the answers themselves, the content of the answers, be kind of relatively smart as far as that business logic would allow us to kind of programming.
The world has changed a bit since then.
Yeah, it's very different right now. Right now, it's not business logic anymore. It's like it goes into the black box and comes back out on the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. And last night I was doing some reading, maybe it was 2 nights ago, just about innovations that came out in March. And it took me about an hour just to scan like the innovations that happened in March from the major platform companies. So things are changing very rapidly. Speaking of that, Diana asked, where are the best AI courses for designers? And before you have a chance to answer, Kai, I'm going to mention the AI Product Design Bootcamp. Strat is putting that on in May 13th to 15th. It's going to be online and it's $295. But other than the Strat course, what kind of courses have you seen out there that designers can learn about AI?
Yeah, I think that's a better question for you, Paul, and you already gave an answer. So the only thing I can say is I signed up for like a Kaggle course by Google that was this week. But I think that is too in-depth for most designers because I think that's much more technical, like if you want to go a level deeper. So I think the Strat the course that you just mentioned, Paul, is probably like a good pointer.
Well, yeah, I think so. We're going to have a number of experts that are guiding people through this, a lot of stuff we're talking about today. Also, another person I know that has really good courses, Rupa Chaturvedi, out by Stanford, has a number of courses. Rupa, you can circle back with me through LinkedIn, and I can give you reference to that. And also, I'm finding amazing the stuff that Google's Pair team did many years ago. We had them as speakers at different events, but their stuff is still relevant. And I would say we're only now coming to the place where we're able to, on a broader scale, adopt some of their practices from Google PAIR, people, AI research or something like that. All right, so how to learn more about AI agent assistant design. Any thoughts around that? AI agents, agentic frameworks. I mean, I hear it all the time, of course, but
Oh,
have you started studying those?
yeah, not I'm very interested, not so much yet. Because that's a step further, right? Where the AI actually starts taking actions for you, um, which is the whole idea of this generative UX, right? Where the AI generates user interfaces for you, is that it can become agentic, right? Because it can become an app, and I can say, um, I want to book a car, like a rideshare car. And instead of having to go to Uber or to Lyft, it like looks at all the different services. It combines them in a new interface. It shows me the different prices, etc. And then I click on one, and then it should book it for me, right? So now it's an agent. Um, So that's kind of what I'm aiming for with these ideas, that it will become agentic. Um, but then there's also other factors, which are that now you're making the AI more powerful, right? Because it can start spending your money and kind of doing things for you. And there's probably some things that we have to kind of keep in mind for that, of like, how are we going to deal with that and make sure that this doesn't kind of get out of hand, that everything still stays safe. So
So
I think,
instead of going over the credit card bill with my kids, now I need to do it with my AI agents and say, what did you spend
exactly.
this money? What's this?
Yeah. How many cars did you book? Yeah.
um, Diana asked, would Kai critique a product idea? Me first. And that is with my glasses. But I think maybe after we post the video in LinkedIn, if you ask nicely on the side, maybe Kai has time for that. I'm not sure. But my idea comes first. It's glasses for people with ADD that gets you back on track. Let's see, there's learn more about the bootcamp in there. Thank you, Valerio, for that. And Scott has offered, Udemy has some decent courses to get started.
Yeah.
Interaction Foundation has an AI and design course. So good for that. From Stephen, how do you approach transparency and explainability? This is especially critical for higher stakes instructions. Like my daughter's studying neurology. I think if the Gen AI is telling her something, then she's going to question that. But in your experience with the wearables, how do you approach transparency and explainability? Because I imagine you can't like see something in your glasses like there's an 80% probability that I'm correct. What do you think?
Yeah. So one thing that I'm already experimenting with in the prototype that I'm playing with is I ask the AI to tell me why it made the decisions it did. So I say something to it, it creates a user interface for me, and then it gives me a few bullet points about like the decisions it made and why it made them. And I'm kind of a little bit blown away by this, like that it can actually reason about its own reasoning, right? Like it's like telling me like these are the decisions I made. So I wonder if you can do something with that um, to say, but in a normal interface, you wouldn't want to do that, right? You wouldn't want the AI to be kind of chiming in about like why it made the interface. But maybe there's information that you can glean from the AI that you can use to influence the interface itself, right? Like I'm super confident about what I'm showing you here, or I'm not so sure, or I could actually show you another version if you want that. Um, so so it could kind of give more information about the thing that it created itself, but maybe in a more kind of UI way, in a more subtle way than kind of giving you a list of bullet points of what it did. I think that would be very interesting.
And we were talking about personalization. I think that this idea of how much feedback people want, the research that I've read about it says quite different amount of information that each kind of person is going to want from AI about that conversation.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like too much information, like where can I get a pizza? And then other times it's like, you really think I should go to France? I'm not sure. And then you ask questions about it. So I think that we differ a lot in terms of how much feedback that we actually want.
Yeah, like you say, it differs on the context, right? On like the specific interaction, and it differs per person probably. But those are all things you could personalize and contextualize for, right? You can have more or less information for different circumstances. Yeah.
Well, it seems like designers do bring something special to the table because I think, sometimes I feel like data science doesn't want us there, but there are some things that I think designers do really well. And you've mentioned this often, and that is ideating, imagining something that doesn't exist and kind of working in your inner vision to kind of see it a little bit and imagine something in the future. And I don't think the people that mainly focus on math necessarily have that skill.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like what when I talked about scientists versus designers. Data scientists are yet again have a different kind of outlook on the world. Um, but I think the combination, in my experience, when I worked with data scientists, worked really well. That they're really interested in. It's a different way of thinking, um, and they also like I would come up with an idea, and then they would kind of based on that had their idea, which was a little bit different because I didn't really understand how the data science works or what's possible and what's not possible. So that interaction between the two disciplines, I think, is really interesting.
Kay, take us home. Give us some advice now before we sign off for today about this coming change, about the shift. How can we prepare as designers?
Yeah, I think it's what we talked about a little bit already. And I'm glad that people are asking for courses, et cetera, that they're interested in learning about it, because I would highly recommend that. You can either learn through courses if that works for you, or you can learn just by doing, right? By just kind of, because everything is online. It's like so easy to get to, right? You can try out all the models. There's all free versions of them. And so I would say, like, play around first, then explore and find some way of prototyping. I even used some prototyping where I asked the AI to make an HTML page for me and give me that, and I would throw that in a browser. It's like the simplest way of prototyping, where you don't even have to have any code running. Um, so try out some kind of prototyping where you can play around with this yourself, and then start proposing, start kind of showing your ideas and proposing ideas in whatever organization you work in, or even like online, if posted on LinkedIn, right? And I think that'll help you be part of the discussion and get you a seat at the table. Because I think one thing I discovered during my career, and it's kind of obvious, is that the designer's superpower is to visualize things and make things tangible. And most other disciplines can't do that. So we have to use our superpower, which is like we can come up with ideas, or even take other people's ideas and then visualize them and show what can be done. And people will come to you and be like, "Oh, that's so cool. Tell me more about it. Can we work together on this?" So I would say kind of use your superpowers to kind of be part of the discussion.
Well, Kay, thanks for taking time out to be with us today. I really appreciate it. And everybody else, Valerio was going to post this video in the LinkedIn group AI and UX at the beginning of next week. Thanks for joining us from this Lunch and Learn today on Friday. Have a good weekend.
It was great to be here. Thank you so much.